Hello, this is an assessment for restoration of a Bluthner style 7 grand piano. It's 190 centimetres long, made in 1894. So the clients asked us to assess the piano to see what work might improve it, and obviously we could fully restore it, but as we'll give the option of either fully restoring or doing the important work. Looking at the key tops, there's some interesting lifting of the key fronts here. I don't think I've seen this before, but if you look at the key fronts, you'll see that, let's just push one down, they're actually not just the front coming off with the wood coming off with it. I don't know if you can see that there, but not just the plastic front, but the wood behind it too. So that's obviously, I think, to do with damp at some stage, maybe damp and then drying out. There's quite a lot of them, as you can see, so we'll have to clamp them and glue them. Hopefully we'll be able to get those right, and there's a little bit of wear on the ivories too, but they're slightly yellowing, so we buff them afterwards and that'll take away some of the yellowing. We can scrape and polish, but I think in this case it's probably not essential to do that. Well, this name could be shined up, but if you don't repolish the whole piano, then it might look a bit incongruous. So let's have a look at the casework, and the legs are always darker on most grand pianos, and especially on Bluthners, so we try and match them in a bit actually if we redo it, and we're doing one at the moment, French polishing it, but that's 70 hours work, so this one certainly would French polish beautifully, but whether we can afford to do that is another question. It's one of the most beautiful looking pianos, really. Now there's a major issue with the back of the top lid here, as you can see, and you can see that there it's someone's attempted to glue it on. Obviously we take all of that off, take the old glue out, try to make it as invisible as possible. Might be a little bit impossible to make it completely invisible, I think. Underneath, actually, if you watch this, you can see, sorry it's a bit dark, I'll put the flash on. Underneath you can see this bit that we have actually got, it's not missing completely, it's in the piano. And you can see here though that the veneer underneath is lifting as well as I push it there. So I don't want to push it too hard, it might make it worse. So that will have to be made good. If we repolish the whole piano, obviously it could be perfect, and it's worth repolishing these because they are very valuable pianos. So many clients are interested in them, so something to think about, but obviously we can make good or repolish. The frame is also very mottled. If this was a stock piano, we would actually fully restore it because this frame colour is not very attractive, shall we say. I don't want to be disparaging, but Bechsteins often go like this, and Bluthner's not quite so much, so that's I don't think so. Anyway, if you're in the trade, you'll probably be able to make a comment on that. Just looking at the general condition of the piano, as usual, Bluthners are so fastidiously made, you don't get really problems. There's no moth here. Moth is so common in pianos, and worth checking your piano just to make sure it's not infested. And looking along here, there's no moth whatsoever, which is good news. Right at the top there is, sorry, spoke too soon. You see a bit of moth damage here, so we'll look at the rest of the piano just to see if there's any moth in it. I did look earlier, I don't think there is. And the soundboard, well, it's always going to look a bit slightly as a split as pianos dry out and get damp and dry out, and so the planks move apart and then they move together again. But there's quite a reasonable split there. That won't affect the tone of the piano. We've mentioned many times before, the tone is carried by the ribs that go in the opposite direction, so the splits don't affect it. I'll just show you the ribs to show you what I mean. So underneath the piano you can see that the soundboard grain is going in this direction and the ribs are going that direction, and the sound is carried by the ribs. So it occasionally can cause buzzing if there's cracks in the soundboard, but it is an indicator that the piano is drying out, and nothing more than that really. If you're in the trade and like to comment, please do. It used to be said that soundboard cracks wrote off the piano, but it's not really true at all. I think you'd agree. There's the crack that we saw at the top, and that's not really going to affect the tone. Tone's carried by the ribs. Very important to know that, and if you're in the trade, it'd be wonderful if you can spread that information rather than people thinking that soundboard cracks have written off their piano, because some very, very good pianos have got cracks in soundboards, but it doesn't really matter at all. By the way, this is the backstay for the pedals, which is conveniently fixed onto the piano on Bluthners. I don't know why all manufacturers don't do that. That should belong in there, but as we temporarily moved it, we left it there. My colleague hasn't put it in, but it's not essential. Pedals operate very well without that, but it's obviously important to have that too. So as we were talking about soundboards, I did want to get that out generally to folks to know that cracks in soundboards don't affect the tone unless they cause buzzing, which is not very common, but it can happen. And obviously if we redo the frame, we recondition the soundboard and shim it as well. So that's what the trade does normally. So they shim the soundboard, filling up the cracks. So it's cosmetic only. This frame is very, very mottled. So if it was to be fully restored, which we would do if it was our own piano, because they do sell well, they're wonderful tone, so it's something we can do from an economical point of view. Now, tuning pins are original and tight. It might be hard to believe that strings this old, 1894 this piano, are still going strong. The main problem with Bluthners is they are quite high tension, so if they're tuned upwards, because it's 2 beats below concert pitch. From my experience, it's very, very easy on Bluthners for these to break. You could tell they're original, by the way, because of the coning here. Now, that one's a bit shorter, maybe that was replaced at some stage, but I don't think so actually. These look like all original Bluthners, typical coning of Bluthners going right through, tapering. Very, very beautiful. Always see that on the original Bluthners, and rarely do you see it on replacement strings, so that's a sign that it's the originals. And all the tuning pins are reasonably tight, so as I say, the main problem is if we pitch raise, even if we lubricate here, which we will do if we pitch raise, because then we take them down through the pin, through the agraf, sorry, and back up. It doesn't matter how fast or slowly you do it, it's still going to very often break. So that's always a nerve-wracking thing to do, pitch raising a Bluthner. And we usually say to the client, if we're going to do it, if they insist, well, obviously we want our pianos at concert pitch, so we always do, so we often have to replace the string, which is a shame. Once they've been pitch raised, they don't normally break afterwards. In fact, I don't think I've ever had the experience of one once we sold it with strings breaking on. So it's just that initial sort of coming back to life period, really. Let's have a listen to the piano. Now it's very mellow. Such a delightful tone in the Bluthner bass strings. You don't want to change them unless you have to. So it's a typical Bluthner old style action, patent action. We've mentioned this many times before, so I won't go on too long about it. It always amazes me how these springs after 125 years are still going strong. Remarkable, really. Not much work being done on the piano, probably a bit of regulation from time to time, but the hammers certainly originals, and you often find these are unbelievably worn. They are quite worn actually, and they're quite soft, so that's creating a very, very soft sound. We can reface them, but they'll still be soft sounding. So we if it was our piano, we would obviously replace them. And you don't necessarily replace shanks on Bluthners because they're remarkably long wearing, and you do normally, as you know, on roller actions. So there's someone who's probably taken the piano out and the hammer's been too high up, so the shank's broken there. That's so common. I have to confess I do that probably once a year. I'm not sure how often to admit to that, but I think tuners have, when I've commented on that before, other tuners have been kind enough to say they've done the same. So that's enough said about that, really. The hammers, they are very soft. You won't get the kind of tone you would really like, but people are used to soft Bluthners, and they're used to their soft tone because they are used to, Bluthners have never had their hammers changed. So I'm digging my nail into that hammer. It's a test for me. It's near the top as well. Too soft, and even if it was refaced. And anyway, there's not a huge amount of felt left there. I think I'm not sure if it's been refaced before, but let's have a look at the top, which is always an indicator of how much, whether you can get away with not changing the hammers. And it's coming through close to the wood, but it would carry on for 30 or 40 years without changing them, but you won't get the kind of tone that you would originally have got. We've got other Bluthners in stock, one that we just sold. So if you look at videos of those, you'll see the sound and how new hammers can make the sound transform. Now, before I play the piano, that's the worksheet that we always do to check pianos, so you can see the details I've been talking about before, and buffing the keys. Repairing the lid is obviously the most obvious cosmetic thing to do, but there's plenty of things that would greatly improve the piano. The key fronts we talked about as well, so they're cosmetic too. Buffing the keys, that's all the cosmetic. Reface or replace the hammers, that's something I'll obviously send an email to the client to give the options and how much it costs. And there's the weight of the keys. That's the last thing we always look at and really important. So generally speaking, 43 grams is a bit on the low side. That's middle C, so it should be 48.52, as we've mentioned many times before. 26 up weight, which is quite good for a Bluthner. It's quite a low up weight. That we mentioned that low up weight feels good. So, but obviously, if you're going to change the hammers, you'll get a different up weight anyway. So I won't get too technical on this, and you can see the need to change some very light ones at the top there, and generally on the light side, which you might want if you like a light piano, don't play very much, then we'll try and even it up for you anyway. So there, I think that's more or less said enough now. I'm going to play the piano. I'm not going to talk when I'm playing the piano, but might put text above the playing if I think of something that I have missed out. Thank you very much for listening.